think because of all the videos that were posted last night, I have more and more people interested in the youth family. I got a few questions this morning, so.
Is there a tuition
Yes,
discount?
I'm sure there is. Yes, so,
You said you had a
yeah, so, I mean, it's pretty funny, so, I mean.
Get a free chapter of Growing Young.
Yeah, you get a free chapter. I do have this here. I know you all read it, and I'm not trying to like promote my wares, but I wanted you to know that something very fun has happened, and I wanted you to know, and maybe you could help me. And that is we got this on Kindle, which was our plan to relaunch it in the fall on Kindle. We did it just through FYI at first because it's easier to get emails and mailing lists because based on what I even told you earlier this week, we're still trying to figure out who's out there. We don't really know. So it was very strategic for us to just do it through the FYI store because with those emails, we can actually follow up with finding out who these people are, do more training, get feedback from them and everything else. But the vision has always been to get it to Kindle because it's just a more common platform and it just goes to a broader audience. So as of this week, actually, it got posted on Amazon and Kindle, and so it's on there with endorsements and things like that, which we don't necessarily have on FYI. But what it doesn't have is reviews of people that have read it. There's like you're not deducted if you don't do it. This is totally free. But I would love it if you would like to rank it and say something if you'd like, because if we, people are gonna trust you more than me, like as far as like reviews and stuff. I may send you a reminder email just in case, but it's just like it'd be nice to like have some stars. There's like nothing on there right now. It's like a weird book, which it is. And for what it's worth, I mean, I know you have it, but if you want to like give this to somebody you know and they want a free chapter, or you want to, they can also go to Kindle now and download a free chapter, which is probably easier. I actually I check out a lot of books that way. I'm always about free download, like, because it helps me kind of see if I actually want the book or not. And it also is a great way to remember. Have you ever I got to get that book, and then I forget about it? Like a system for I got to get that book is really great. And I actually find the Kindle's really helpful for that because I can peruse a lot of books really fast and decide if I'm going to buy it or not. So for what it's worth, do that. So anyway, thanks in advance if you want to do it. If you don't, it's totally fine. I don't really care, but we're just trying to get the word out. It's good. Apparently what our marketing team is telling us is that when you look up young adult ministry, it usually goes to churches or it goes to FYI now. So we actually are getting an interesting sort of response as far as training goes. So I think we're sort of a bit on kind of cutting the wake, if you will, the conversations associated with that. So that's going to go. So if you're interested in that, you want to talk further, I don't know, let's do something cool. So
how do you do a review on this? Because I'm trying to figure this out too.
Go all the way down and said write a review.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I have a tutorial here that I'll walk you through right now. It'd be great.
Don't you have to import it through Amazon to write a review through Amazon?
No, but there's like a little thing that says certified or verified buyer. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Stars.
We can do that later. I appreciate your
forget.
enthusiasm. You will be the first one. So you really will determine like the stars of this one. So if you did one is bad.
I'm going to put 5.
But yeah, people get that so mixed up. It's so funny. Like sometimes we'll look at our reviews and it's like, what happened? And it's like, I think, and then the review's glowing, but they give you a 1. You read it. Can you fix that? So great to have you back. I want to take some time today to just reflect a bit, share a couple thoughts on the gospel and talk about final papers, which I know is on your mind. We turn our direction toward that, this is like all the feels and then we have to work again, which is hopefully that's good. But I thought it'd be great, and I do this a lot with my team. I do it with Kara Powell, I do it with people I work with, but just to kind of reflect on the experiences that we had. And so I just wanted to take a minute, if you don't mind. I mean, we can turn and talk with each other, or we can just talk out loud. But what are a few takeaways from this week for you? Like, what struck you? And again, we don't have to answer all these specifically. I'm just sort of having these three statements here. Share how you felt like you were inspired or encouraged, and how you might want to live or work differently as a result. I'm just kind of curious what's been going on inside. We've had a lot of opportunities for conversations and that type of thing, but I think it's nice to come back sort of where we began this week of kind of sharing what's going on with us, but in more focused in light of this week. So, what do you want to do? Oh, Jesse, you're gonna start. Okay.
I mean, I've just got a practical one. I have a young adults retreat in January that my wife and I will be speaking at, and so the content on transitions. I thought, definitely gonna implement that into.
Oh.
And like the graph or the chart in growing in young adult ministry now, like the linear versus like the definitely gonna use that as well.
Yeah, so that's great. When you do that, will you let me know how it goes? Like what really connected with this young adults that you're working with, or these young adults? Yeah. If there's, I would love to hear your reflection from that. That was really helpful to me. So we can either get on the phone or you can email me. Awesome. I know I just sprung the question at you, so if you need a minute to think, don't feel any pressure.
This is profound, but something that stuck with me. Dr. Song talked a little bit about how impactful small changes have been in really helping for students to grab onto something in the easy to theory world, in big change kind of like mentality, but convincing someone to take a 10-minute break. And how life-giving some of those things like spiritual practice is only effective if our kids can do it at home, take it with them. And so it's kind of simple.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, Steve.
Beyond the classroom, which has been great content, this community I think is going to be really good for me as a student. So each of you has been it's been a good to connect with y'all for me. So yeah, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I just want to echo kind of what Taylor said, but there's a way that like different people have different gifts, perspectives, contexts, art of asking questions as you hear content that I'm like, oh, I didn't think of it that way, or a way that maybe when somebody shares something, you kind of follow up with a question, which kind of helps me process whether it's the writing process or just even coming to material. Sometimes it even just seems like obvious things like listening. Active listening is like, it's like something old, right? This isn't like a new idea, but it's like the way we can unpack it. So I think the community of sharing here is really helpful, and so don't underestimate the worth of your questions or the impact that they could have as a community of learners, because something that sticks out to me, or the reading papers or the things that you put out there, it really matters. So
Thanks. Yes.
I think this week is always a break from our normal type of productivity, and I appreciate it. We're not reading 4,500 pages or writing or doing our emails and jobs and writing sermons and lessons and everything. And so in some ways you're like, oh, I'm just sitting here being and thinking and talking, but that's a very important aspect of like our being and our work. And so I just appreciate that opportunity to sit together and create space for these things that often are some of the most important things that get kind of sacrificed on the altar of the other productivity that we have to do in our lives.
We host a lot of things at FYI, and a lot of pastors come in and really distract me. And I have to say, you all have been really, I felt like you've been really present this week, and that's been so encouraging to me. I know it's a sacrifice, and I know life is still happening, but so I appreciate you saying that, and thank you.
I think the being here too has provided a really interesting kind of counterpoint to the whole discussion about online and embodied, and how much the relationships, like having known many of you for 2 years but never met, how important the online interaction has been as well as the embodied interaction. And that's kind of a, I don't know, meta thought. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've been really encouraged and inspired by our conversation on teaching and how to create a space and how to facilitate that. I think that's been really, yeah, just like inspirational as we all come in different leaders and the way that we teach is different. But I really enjoyed even just thinking through that process. It was really fun.
Especially in your context, there's so many different ways you having to probably think about that. So that's really awesome. Yeah, yeah.
I said this yesterday, we were chatting just briefly, but it was the speakers that you've invited in they're experts in the field, they've written books, yet they have a posture of curiosity. Like when people asked Alicia Wusan or Michaela a question, they were like, I gotta ponder this. This is a good, like there was a posture of like, they're on a lifelong learning journey. Or like when you asked Cutter a question, it's like, yeah, exploring this. Like sometimes I think people are, they've got their doctorate to like finish. I just appreciate that there's like a process and they model that. It wasn't just their content, but like the facial expressions, the recognition of the questions asked was kind of a learning takeaway too.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. Glad you noticed that.
So I was reminded and inspired through all these conversations in small groups about how important vulnerable is and how hard vulnerable is. So I remember yesterday's discussion. So we even need to be courageous to admit that, okay, my boat is taking water. So yeah, I need self-care, I need community, I need friendship. So this might help us to be more in a more better position posture when we are in the ministry. And our transparency, our humility also can help the ministry to learn how to be vulnerable as a group, as a community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. That's really good.
Jumping off what Sam said, kind of questioning, have I been trained to be vulnerable? Like if I'm trying to do that with them, but kind of realizing like, oh, maybe that wasn't a part of what was modeled for me. And so trying to figure out how, I think that was a topic just with the student relationship, and relationships with just anyone at the church, like I'm modeling it, but have I taken steps myself to like, learn how to do that?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then a lot of the things about asking, I think Professor Wusong talked about asking more questions up front. It's something she's doing more so she can adjust. And I think that gets at something you said yesterday with the research. Instead of do they know answers, what questions are they asking? So I think, yeah, to echo what was said about that, you just felt like they were also asking questions with us. And so I think that being modeled was just a neat thing to carry forth. So
Yeah, I love that. I love it.
A little bit of what Josh and JP said, like, I don't come from an academic household. Like my parents don't have degrees and my sister. And so watching you interact with them and just how academics kind of discuss and dialogue and has been really interesting and cool, just to see that. So.
Yeah, Drew.
I think more so this year than any other year, it's something just as a takeaway for me has been sitting in the tension of being a practitioner and an academic, and like what a gift it is to sit in this tension, because we are in our community surrounded by a lot of fellow practitioners. And so how does our academic journey translate to partnering and supporting our brothers and sisters in Christ who don't have the same opportunity, who have questions, and to say, hey, academics are not hard. It just takes training and a mindset shift. You can answer your questions by doing this process, and here's how I can journey with you, help you answer your own questions. Here's the access resources or books or whatever it may be, so that we're not just staying in this elite club, but we're saying, hey, we still in that tension point and we're in both worlds gently.
Love it, Trey, thanks. I'm not gonna make you all share, but you're welcome to share. So just so you know, like, I always like, this is kind of like dodgeball, like after less people standing now.
I've just enjoyed being with you all. As an introvert, I've appreciated how this week has really stretched me, and I'm sad that for a lot of you, this might be the first time and last time I'll see you guys. Oh, at least physically, right?
Yeah.
For a long time.
Thanks, Will. It's good to have you.
See you at graduation commencement.
Yeah, I'll come back for all of your.
Eternity.
Eternity, oh, yes.
There will be an after party
will,
at the
yes.
house. You will go across the flamingo in your robe.
Oh, I'm down. I'm down.
I mean, it at least helps us pay for the robe, like beyond just the one time we're gonna wear it.
Yes. Yeah, I guess I've been along those lines, been trying to think about how we like keep this like community of where we can talk about youth ministry from a different standpoint. When I'm at home, I'm in the thick of it. I'm thinking about, oh, I've got a message coming up in 2 days I need to prepare for. I've got this retreat coming up, and like being able to be here, not just here this week, but reading books together and discussing them together online has also been like helpful to kind of pull myself out of the day to day. And so I'm like, how do we continue that for those of us that are finishing up, hopefully sometime soon? And so like, how do we keep that sense of like community of like Drew, what you were saying, like people that are both practitioners and academics? I've just been thinking about that a lot, and I have no answers for it. Nice.
I think part of the value of this community that I want to take back is that I love the little pockets of people and support. It's easy. It's a hard time to be in church ministry. And it's easy to live in like scarcity mindset and like let that just be a spiral. We sat with some like realness and then like some of the content we're wading into is hard and would like trend us into that space, but I think pretty consistent. This community has lived in an abundance mindset. Hopefully, what's next for the church? What is the capacity of our kids to like experience like meaningful growth and change? And that's been huge. That's been a huge part of this community being as life getting it's been.
I think I've been struck by, like with my master's students, a lot of them are aspiring pastors and teachers and leaders. A lot of enthusiasm, way too many answers. And, and I love that. This hope. I think you have to go into ministry-oriented things with some sense of hope, like almost like an unrealistic optimism. Like with all of you, you're not aspiring teachers and pastors, because you are teachers and pastors. And I feel really humbled and honored to share this with you. I think it fills me up. I mean, it's a tiring week, we're all like giving a lot, but it also fills me up and it reminds me of what it's about. And I think sometimes in academic practitioner world, in which I live a lot, and more in the academic in many ways, you can kind of lose sight of what it's about. Theories and ideas and data, positivity and that's the world I love and live in, right? But if it doesn't ever ground itself, then it's like it doesn't mean much to me anymore, so I mean I tell students all the time, like good theology always has to have a name and a face, right? I mean, it just has to. And so so your questions and your lives, the good, the bad, and the hard, your thinking just gives me new motivation and inspiration. And I'm not just being American when I say that, or way too optimistic, but it really. So thank you for being here and inspired me that way. Okay, so yeah, I'm wondering. One thing I lament this week is Michael Salib not being with us,
Yeah.
and I don't. He made the best choice for him, and I honor that, right? But I was just thinking, can I just like do a video? Can we just say hi to him? I want to send it to him. I just kind of want him. I mean, it's always hard to like be the one that can't make it, right? You know what I mean? So I don't know how to do it, but can we just like do that? So I don't know. Here we go.
Yeah, do we know his new kid's name?
Baby's name. Or wife.
Can someone look it up?
Big boy, big girl. I mean, are we not identifying?
Yes, you've got 10 minutes.
Quick research. We can do it.
Let's just go with.
According to Facebook, he's online now.
Yeah.
He doesn't post about his kids.
Let me wait. I made a minute.
No,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
at the.
Right? Is he in Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah. I'm gonna see it.
Look at that picture.
Yeah, right.
Great time to get your.
So some serious rogues there.
Yeah, see, online now.
Yeah, he's online right now.
Just FaceTime.
I don't know. I don't think I have it handy. Well,
We can still say hi.
We can still say hi.
sorry, it's gonna be. let's just- Okay. All right, we're gonna try to do this. Hey, Michael, we are all here and we are thinking of you right now. And we just want to say something to you.
Hey!
What are you doing? We're thinking of you and we just want you to know that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Great job. That was awesome.
Okay.
Okay, a reflection. We've been reflecting on the day, but I just want to always take some time and just reflect with you. This is just to yourself. You're not going to share this, okay? So just these two things. What do you think keeps you from being the best version of yourself? And conversely, what inspires you to be the best version of yourself? I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to just do this. And again, nobody's doing this. This is just for you. So be as honest or raw or deceitful as you want. That's annoying. What can do about it? I don't know what came to mind when you thought about those things. Perhaps something we all wrestle with. One of you asked me this week, does Does imposter syndrome ever go away? My answer was no. Maybe that's a symptom of us always wrestling with the best and worst of who we are, right? Wanting the best to come out, fearing the worst will. Always see someone better than us, or comparing the expertise of someone with the averageness of that part of their life that for me or whatever. I don't think it ever really goes away. And so your degree won't solve that. It's not like, oh my gosh, like I won't have that feeling evermore after I walk across the stage. No, it'll still be there. It might actually be worse. I mean, like the Fuller is filled of professors that just have imposter syndrome. We all have it. It's just hilarious. At least I think so. I'm pretty sure. And so I just want to reflect on these two passages, read these to you, and just leave it at that. But the first one comes from, again, an account of Jesus in Mark 4, and then something that Paul says to the Corinthian church in 1 Corinthians. Again, Jesus said, "What shall we say the kingdom of God is like? What parable shall we use to describe it?" I almost feel like he doesn't look like Dr. Wusong at that point. He's looking up, wondering how he's going to answer that, right? I mean, it's almost just Jesus-like. That's what I think about that. It's like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all seeds on the earth. Yet, when planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all of the garden plants, with such big branches that the birds can perch in its shade. And then Paul says this, and after all, and what after all is Apollos? What is Paul? Only servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord has assigned to each of you his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God's been making it grow. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who brings things to grow. I find it interesting that Jesus, and Paul picks up on it too, has a really unique theology of the mustard seed. It's pretty simple. Plant, water, and believe that something will grow. And I find that interesting because with all our technology, with all the things that we do in the world, that's still true with farming, right? Like somehow a seed, not like usually like this anymore, usually with machines or whatever, is still planted in the ground with the hope and the belief that it will grow. And there's this act of faith that comes with that. So the equation is pretty simple. Invest and believe it will grow. Okay. I think sometimes we're haunted with imposter syndrome. And we don't become the best versions of ourselves because we've bought the narrative of the opposite. Let's see if it'll grow. And then we'll determine if you're a good investment. You ever feel that? And that's the productivity thing, right? I think students feel it. Let's see what you can do, and then we'll decide if you're worthy of attention or love, or acceptance or privilege. You could be on the team. You can stand up front. Right? We perpetuate almost an anti-gospel. Instead of saying, you're a good investment, and I believe you can grow, to let's see if you're a good investment, and then I'll decide about see if you grow. And I think I just want to say to all of you, in Jesus' own words, you're a good investment. You matter. God believes that you're going to grow. And I do too. And maybe that's what we just need to pass on as well to others as we experience that as well. I'm struck too by Jesus' constant call throughout the Gospels of him basically saying, believe in me. Believe in me. believe in me. But I think he's able to do that because I think there's a subtext that's sort of in between the lines of the scriptures. And it's really a message to me and to you as well. And it's this, believe in me, says Jesus. Because I believe in you. You're a good investment. You're worth it. Before you do anything. So as we leave this place and go back to producing, catching up, and trying to find our space and our rhythm again, let's just remember that you're not like whole when that happens. You're going back now, like whole, believed in, a good investment. Maybe that inspires us to be more gentle when we feel that the worst of ourselves is coming out. Or maybe it'll inspire us to be the best version of ourselves too, right? Because I think I just wanted to tell you that. God, thanks for this. Thanks for the things that we're already been reflecting on today. Thanks for the things that you're speaking to us, Spirit, that you want us to take away. Thank you, Jesus, for your believing in us, for believing that we're a good investment. No matter what we've done, what degrees we have, may that inspire us to be the best version of ourselves that you see in us. And maybe live with that motivation and that light. Thank you that you hear and answer our prayers because of Jesus' name.
Amen.
So I want to just talk for a second about the gospel. I think learner-centered teaching is really important. I think asking the question of what's good news to young people is really important. But if we were to critically reflect maybe on our own conversations, I think we have to always remember that, ultimately, there's this gospel that we care about, right? We're inviting students into something that we actually believe matters. It's like life-changing. It's more than life-changing. It's like life or death, right? I mean, in every essence of that, from an eternal perspective to making it through the day. And as I think about the gospel, there's a couple of sort of impulses I think that I try to kind of keep in my mind, whether I'm thinking about teaching and learning or ministry or teaching or whatever I'm doing. And I just kind of want to share these with you. Again, these are just sort of Steve's musings. These you can take them or leave them. They may work for you. They may not. I don't care. They work for me. Make your own. Write your own. That's what it's about, right? But I think these things have impacted me in ministry and also in teaching, and I think I want to share them with you. So, what is a gospel-centered ministry? Well, or a youth ministry? I think it's good news understood narratively. We talk a lot about this idea of story, right? And I really believe, and this is something that we would say a lot back at Mars Hill, where I pastored, but I really believe that the best story wins. And the challenge that we have is to tell the best story, right? To actually do that. So sometimes I don't think we tell the best story well. It gets short-circuited, it gets cut off. It just doesn't have the impulse, right? So kids aren't really rejecting good news or the gospel. They're kind of just unimpressed with this amazing story that's changed our lives and we believe it can change others. And I think about that a lot of times as I think about Hebrews 1 through 3. The writer of Hebrews has a really interesting sort of come out of the gate sort of moment in this letter, whoever the writer of Hebrews is, right? And but we know that we can assume in many ways that the writer of Hebrews is writing to Hebrews, right? I think we can make that assumption, right? There's an assumption about the fact that the psyche of the readers or the listeners of this narrative have a Jewish background. And so with that comes this deep and powerful story of which they are a part of, right, already. And so the writer of Hebrews says this, and it's like a mini diagram here, but it says this. It says, in the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets in many times and in various ways, but in these last days, God has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir over all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. And after he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty of heaven. Now, if we were to diagram this like in an academic sort of way, we see something right out of the gate. In the past, God spoke. Imagine if God didn't. I mean, God is taking this amazing initiative to reach out to us and is pursuing us. And we see that throughout the story, right? God's not sitting back with his arms crossed, wondering if we're ever going to see him. But God is pursuing us. And so we see that. And then he says this interesting phrase to our forefathers and prophets and everything else. And so I kind of like to think of this as, in the past, God spoke in a whole bunch of ways, a whole bunch of times, and a whole bunch of ways. But what's interesting about this is, as he talks about this, maybe ways to think about it is this, is that the way that God spoke in a whole bunch of ways and a whole bunch of possibilities and times is that it started kind of with Adam and Eve, right? You have this encounter that God has with, however we think about Adam and Eve, we have this encounter where God is like inviting Adam and Eve into a relationship, right? But they also have a responsibility, and this responsibility is has like an element of priesthood associated with it, right? They are called to care for the earth. And sort of represent God to creation and creation to God, and they play this particular role. And we know that they didn't do a very good job, right? I mean, they fight, they left the garden, everybody's blaming everything, right? And so that doesn't go so great. So they get kicked out, and then we sort of have this wandering, this meandering, and all the failure after failure as we try to read through the First Testament. But then we come to this moment where Israel is called by God, right? And the purpose of Israel is not to sort of have a favored status, but to be a blessing to the nations, right? So again, Israel sort of plays this priestly role again, of sort of representing God to the world and the world to God, and their job was to, in many ways, usher in this story, this good news of a pursuing God that cares about humanity. And we know that Israel doesn't do that great, right? They're wandering in the wilderness, they're fighting, nothing goes right, God's ticked. Don't blow them up, I mean, obviously, I don't even understand what we're supposed to do with that. But, there's all this stuff sort of going on there. And then we get to this point later on in the First Testament where we sort of have like the prophets, right? And the prophets, if I could like summarize it, it's like there's just this longing. They're like this longing of like, when will someone come and save the people? When will we get things right? Because it's just not going right. And so N.T. Wright talks about this idea of sort of this diminishing aspect that's sort of happening in the way that God is interacting with the world. Like the light is going out. God is pursuing and trying and somehow to connect with God's creation, but it's not happening. And there's this failure after failure after failure, disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And so we get to this point of just this longing, right, at the end of the old First Testament. And so the writer of Hebrews says, in the past, God has spoken in a whole bunch of ways and a whole bunch of times, and it's not going well, right? But then he says, but then God has spoken to us by his Son, right? The Greek is actually just in Son, in huios, like God speaks in Son, like Spanish people speak in Spanish, French speak in French, Chinese people speak in Chinese, and God speaks in Son. That's like Jesus is like the language of God, right? So we see something really, really powerful happening in this moment. And what N.T. Wright talks about is there's actually this all of a sudden this glimmer of hope. Like what looks like is a failed attempt all of a sudden takes on new life. And what happens with that is like Jesus calls the 12, right? And we know that the 12 disciples are like, it's like a great small group number, but it's also like this idea of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? We see that God is this like almost redeeming the story, like bringing and like turning it around. And that then turns into this idea of the church, right? Where we see the birth of the church of Acts, right? I like to think of Acts as, I'd like to change the title from the Acts of the Holy Spirit or the Acts of the Apostles to, I just want it to call, they're included too, Question mark. That would be the title of Acts, right? Because if you look at, I mean, all through Acts, it's just like, oh yeah, we're in, but you're not. And like, oh, wait a minute, you are too. Like, oh, you're in, oh, you're not. Oh, well, you're in too. Like, and so you just have this amazing story going all the way through Acts of like the ones that are in, like completely having their minds blown that it's actually not just them. It's not about them. It's about somebody else, right? So you see this expansion that begins to happen with the birth of the church and the gift of the Holy Spirit that begins to encounter something that we still feel today, right? So I kind of think about this idea that you know, like in malls or like in maps where you have the dot that says you are here. Like I think when we think about like God's redemptive story, I just kind of like want to remind myself, I want to remind my church, and I want to remind my students, like you're here. Like this is what you're a part of. This is what you're invited into. Like you are part of God's like impulse and priority to make the world better. And the gospel, the good news, is about that. Through the work of Jesus, through everything and all the details, but ultimately we're inviting each other and we're inviting our students into a story that has meaning and connection and purpose, and that their life is not like extra. It's like the world is better because they're here, right? Their literal existence makes the world a better place. The world would not be the same without you, right? And it seems to me like, how do I tell that story to my students? Like it always gets so reduced, right? To like, I mean, we can make fun of like say the prayer. I mean, all that's important, but I'm just saying we so often I kind of feel like sometimes the way I talk about the gospel is so uninspiring. It's so short-circuited, it's so limited, right? And like I actually think people care about wanting to make a difference in the world. Like we only, I mean, you know, we all can give examples of that, right? So how do we tell this story? Because I think that's the one that matters. What's really cool is the reason that we see the turn of events, right? Like I forgot to say this. Like in the Hebrews thing, did you notice like God speaks in the Son, and then there's this huge list of all these like theological Jesus, right? But there's 7, right? So 7 is like a perfect number, right? And a lot of times in Hebrew literature, 7 is like the exclamation point, right? And the 7 is like, and it says that he sat down at the right hand of the Father, right? So, I mean, at the mercy seat, you know, like when the priest sits down, I mean, priests always stand for the sacrifice, right? Jesus sits down. There's like no need for more sacrifice. There's no need for more of that. So like God is like, Jesus is like, it's finished, like all of it. Like, let's get going. Let's do something, right? So like, this isn't like sentiment, right? Like this is like something major has happened and we are a part of God putting the world back together. You know, your writing is about putting the world back together. You know, your degree is about putting the world back together. That's what it's about, right? So like maybe, so just talking about all those students out there for a second, let me just say to you, you are here, like in the middle of this. Like the only way this pushes out is with you, right? So like when you don't want to do your paper, like pull this out and say, I'm here. Like, you know, let's push it a little bit further, right? And then I think we can invite our students into that as well. So that's one way I like to sort of think about the story, is that there's this narrative sort of element associated to it. And I think it's really important. And I can't help but think about the gospel in its totality like this. I have to think about it that way, because if I don't, then I feel like I default to moralism, I default to behaviorism, I default to my own insecurities, because I forget what I'm a part of, right? Or not just my insecurities, but my own importance, right? In a bad sort of way. Like, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you think about that, but like sometimes I think we just have to be like captivated by the gospel again. Like, you know, I mean, like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, oh, we get to do this, right? Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. because I thought it was good. Now, another way I think about this is, I don't know if I'm gonna do this or not. I think I do. Do you still have your marker?
Yes.
I just really like that marker a lot. Best marker I've ever had, and I don't trust this.
Somebody gave us good markers on the base.
Seriously, I was like, I like. you.
You did file your markers in Australia.
I
But you have to
do.
call it a texter.
A texter?
Yeah.
I really like a texter. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so as I thought about this idea of this redemptive story of God that really, and I give N.T. Wright like so much credit. I mean, he's talked a lot about this. I mean, he kind of showed up in my life at this time when all of a sudden, like, I don't know, he changed my view of Jesus. He really did. I don't know how else to say it. Like, and I mean, to think about a Jewish Jesus and earthy Jesus, and you know, all that comes with that just kind of changed it for me. But then I started thinking as I worked at with another training organization, just about like, well, how do we tell this story? Like, you know, this thing is kind of nice. It's a little abstract in some ways. Theology is abstract, right? That's what makes, I think, telling good news so hard sometimes, is that I think young people need something very tangible and up close. And so that's why the question, you know, what's good news to them really matters, because I think they can name it and that's good. But there's also a bigger, like there's this bigger gospel of good news too. And so always trying to kind of connect those together is really, really hard. So some friends of mine and I, we try to think about like these snapshots of like, how do we help kids like remember the story of God? And so we tried to come up with this. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to try to do it for you. But it goes something like this. You know, really the story of God begins before the story where God existed as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They were in relationship with each other, and they existed, but they decided to create this perfect world, and this world is one that is just right for living things to flourish. And so then God creates Adam and Eve, and you can decide if that's the male or that's the female, and if this is the female, let's just remember that's a cake. And so they were in like God created Adam and Eve and all of creation in perfect harmony and relationship for their flourishing, so that they could be all that they could be. But we know from the story that this relationship gets fractured, right? People trusted themselves rather than God, and so we have this fracturing of relationship between each other and of God, and we still feel the ripple effects of that today, right? I mean, we're feeling the effects of our perpetual, you know, sort of discord associated with that. And so eventually, this discord gets to the point where God decides to do something about it, and God decides to rescue God's people, who were called the Israelites. And so we think about the Exodus and then kind of going through the river and the parting of the waters. And so this is sort of a theme of God rescuing God's people and wanting to do that. And so we see God rescuing that, and that God cares about that. And then God decides to give these commandments. And these commandments were written not because God wanted to catch us doing something wrong, but because God actually wanted us to win, like wanted us to like make it, right? So I think this is a lot about God. Like God's not like looking for us to like blow it, but God actually wants us to get it, right? And so we have this going on, but we also know that within this relationship, because God wants us to win and God wants us to have relationship, that things didn't always go as planned, because like in any relationships, we kind of make mistakes along the way. And so God created this like a sacrifice system. That's a sheep, don't make fun of it. And the whole idea was, in many ways, to bring about this sense of reconciliation, of being able to kind of right wrongs and to have that opportunity for that to happen. And yet, even though there was this sacrifice system, we still had the promise that we're looking forward to something more, like this longing to somehow kind of bring complete and total reconciliation together. And that's really where all of a sudden we recognize the fact that how does this work again? I just remember. that eventually Jesus comes into the world, anticipated by the prophets, longed for by the people. Merry Christmas. And he lived a life that was different than what was expected. He was thought to become as this ruler that was going to put everything to rights, but instead what he does is he comes as a servant. And interestingly enough, that and even though he came in as a servant, I think people didn't expect him to come that way. And so he ends up being the one that's actually persecuted and killed because of the way that that he didn't live up to what other people expected of him to be. And this is a really sad piece right now, but this also is something that as Christians, we find really inspiring, that Jesus would go to such lengths to love us and care for us. And so, and to be in the midst of our pain and our suffering as much as we often feel. But that's not the end of the story. We find that Jesus rose again, proving his detractors and his accusers wrong, and opens up a whole new world for us to consider. I don't know if I'm running out of room, so I'm just going to come down here. And so God, in many ways, Jesus, in many ways, his resurrection isn't the end, but it's really the beginning. It's a beginning of possibility. It's a beginning of God putting the world back together. And God is calling people into this new world order, this new opportunity to be part of God's healing and God's restoring. And we know as Christians that when people who are invited into God's story are together, that's the church. And that's all the church is. It's just a bunch of Jesus people like following Jesus and trying to join God in what God is doing in the world. And through the Holy Spirit, the church is animated where we are committed to not only loving God ourselves, but loving others even more so that the whole world can be healed and be put to rights. And this is what we are part of. And so this is sort of like the 12 snapshots of the story of God together. So there you go. So I won't make you do this, but sometimes when I do this with students, I ask them, I'll just say, so tell me what you see. What themes come through? You know, what do you notice, right? And this is a great opportunity for them to sort of reflect on that. And a lot of them will say, wow, the dying for the sins is way down here. There's a lot of stuff that happened before that, right? Oh, I didn't really think about the church or why we go to church. Well, you know, maybe that's associated with it, or maybe God's putting all things back together, right? I mean, there's just a lot of ways to think about this. And the other thing that was really interesting is I was giving this seminar for a bunch of youth pastors, and I was sharing this with them. And the kid, there was a kid that was doing the AV thing, you know, he had all set up. 15, kind of quiet, sit there. And what I did with the youth pastors, I said to him, okay, so I'm going to erase this, and I want someone to come up and recreate it, because like the symbols, like they kind of jog your memory, right? I couldn't get a single youth pastor to go up there and do it. An AV kid said, "I'll do it," and went up and created the whole thing. And all of a sudden, I was legit. All the youth pastors were like, "I want that," you know what I mean? It was a really great moment. You know, I told the kid after, like, I think I got to pay you like something. That was just right. So sometimes I think what we have to do as we tell the story of God is just help ourselves, but help young people like recreate it, think about it, and understand it, and let it mull in their head. I know other youth pastors that have taken these symbols and have put them around their youth room just to kind of say we are part of the story of God. That's the concept. Right? Now, your theology, you might not like my symbols. Change it. You may say, well, why did you leave out, some sort of theological move? You can do it. I just did like 13. It sounds more scary than 12. You may want to reduce it. I don't really know, but for me, I felt like it captured the themes that I think were important, and I thought that I would. But I'm not sure. So yeah, I don't know what you think of it. What do you think? Like, hey, you want to give me comments, or should I keep going? Yeah.
I think it's just paradigm from it's gonna make me better, or like if I'm healed from my sins, like I just have to be, it's that transactional kind of ministry. Well, Jesus healed me, now I need to do this and make Jesus happy. Versus, no, you're part of the entire story.
Yeah.
And you have a role in God's plan, and that it's not that you are some like special people that somehow it's like just you and God, but it's you're so much bigger, and so and you are important in that.
Yeah.
And so it's reframing transactionalism towards really you're on the journey with everyone else, that you're part. Your heritage is as much as important as Moses's heritage, or those who crossed the river or the sea. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, right? Yeah, it's like, and it's their story. It's their part of it, right? Yeah, I love it.
How long did that take you to do? Like,
What's that?
how long did that take you to do? Like 8 minutes?
Yeah, like 8 minutes.
Just thinking about this in regards to evangelistic tools, like you could,
Yeah, yeah.
you don't need anything. You can
It's
just
funny
have
you
this
say that,
conversation.
because this came out of an organization that really valued evangelism, but they kept using like the four spiritual laws or whatever, and we just really struggled with that, not, because it just didn't seem like it was connecting, and it just seemed incomplete. And so a lot of our conversations actually ran out of that. So it's just funny that you brought that up. I kind
Yeah.
of forgot that was true. But yeah, it doesn't take long.
Yeah.
You write it on a napkin.
Yeah, I think one of the critiques of like the bridge diagram for spiritual laws is like the individualistic nature
Yeah.
of it. Like it's about God's transaction with me so I can go to heaven.
Yeah.
Versus a larger story that I'm a part of. And then also, the end of like the bridge diagram is so I can get saved, but then what do I do?
Yeah.
Versus like you're part of this going out.
Yeah.
So,
You can teach this to students and they can personalize it too and share their story in it as this is what matters the most to me, or this is what matters to me right now, or
Yeah.
can,
I think it's helpful for us as leaders to remember this perspective, like think about what we talk about with Joss and spiritual growth, of like seeing spiritual growth is how do we help young people live into this story as their spiritual growth rather than a list of like accomplishment metrics. Yeah.
I think the only critique I have of it would be really highlighting at the beginning the brokenness and creating that image, maybe even like doing a line through the circle, like and because the end is so important, is that image of we are now in relationship with God, and that his work is restorative, and that the most joyous moment of our life is not the moment we were saved, but the time that we will be with God in full glory and seeing his glory and being a part of that. And so the multiple circles is good, but I don't know, I want to capture that beauty so much more, because that's
Doesn't that imply though that God completely removes himself from the world if the brokenness is overemphasized? Like God never gives up on his people.
true. But I mean, not to go on a whole theological debate, but
No, let's do it.
in Rome, I mean,
My flight's not till 11.
okay, I mean, Romans 8 is pretty clear of how like distant we are from God. So it's not his distance from us, but it's our distance from him. That's what the only thing that the bridge illustration is nice about is it connects the gap. That it's not God's distance, it's our distance. But just highlighting that distance, because I wonder how many of us and young people feel that distance from God, and they're constantly trying to pursue God, work their way to it. Of if I just do the right things, if I just can read my Bible, if I can just do this, I will get to God. And the beauty of the story is that it's never what we do for God, it's always what was done for us. And so the restorative work of God is the moment that we all long for because it's done.
Yeah, but I think for kids who don't know Christ, when you say everything is wrong or everything is bad, they're like, no, I go to Bondi Beach every morning and I surf and it's beautiful, right? Like that. And if you think about like in one of the books in first year, like that quest for justice, delight in beauty, all those things that are spin that we are seeing God in. I think if we make that break too great, it just doesn't connect with the world that the kids live in.
Yeah, I actually agree with Fee here. Maybe this is like anecdotal, but like I find that most young people like push Christian faith away because of its emphasis on like the world's going to hell in a handbasket and like you are bad and like you are distant from God. And like I think that I find so many young people that are turning to like I don't know, new age spiritualism is
Crystals.
like there's too much in it, but like yeah, it's like crystals, like
Yeah.
oh, like there's something spiritual about the world around me. Astrology, like the universe has like a plan for me, the universe is working, like there's like this sense that like there's something transcendent around me, there's something transcendent in the universe itself. And so when we really focus on what I would say is it comes out of a very American spiritualism, like kind of like great revival, kind of like you are evil, like you're bad kind of stuff, which I would say is not actually historic Christianity, like as it was known for 1700 years. It actually like pushes young people away. So, and again, we are vastly different theologically, which is one of the things I love about you, Drew. But I struggle with that.
No one loves me.
I wonder is
We know you only love girls.
I think.
Sorry, I was misquoting.
I wonder if what we're talking about is actually part of our job as like pastors to figure out how do we contextualize this to where we are, because I think the conversation that we're having is like, I think in some context that would work really well around the world, like emphasizing the brokenness, because the entire world we see around somebody who's enslaved or whatever the situation is feels extremely broken. But I think the conversation we're having here is like, I think you're right. I think there is something transcendent that students don't necessarily feel the brokenness in that way, but contextualizing the gospel to them to say, yeah, there is something transcendent that you get to be a part of. That's restorative. I don't know. I think that's kind of what I'm wondering and wrestling with and thinking as I'm hearing you guys kind of talk a little bit.
Because I think with Jeremy's point, I'd say like perfectionism is such a burden that my girls feel. And one of my favorite books is Buffett's Unapologetic, and how he talks about recognizing that you're a sinner is so freeing and such a gift of God to you. So yeah, like even we're not in the same place. Hey, yeah, for how we talk to the kids that we're
And I think just even talking about not even just the individual brokenness, but our systemic brokenness. I mean, racism, sexism. I mean, the image that we see is this beautiful picture of every tribe and nation bowing before the Lord in equity. And so when we look at the journey, I mean, the cross is the reconciliation of everything. And so I don't know, that's just for me, it's like really highlighting not only the world is broken, then the cross is the crux that puts us into perfection. And it's not this individualistic perfection, which I think is the danger of American Christianity, but it's the full restoration of all creation. I think I in notes here, Adam and Eve called to represent creation to God and God to creation. At the end, it's Jesus who represents creation to God, creation. And so that full recognition and completion there.
Well, the full recognition is a new heaven and a new earth, where there's no dichotomy anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, and that's what I didn't quite say it at the end, but I mean, heaven comes down.
Yeah.
We don't go up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's something I tell a lot of people is when they go, I'm going to go to heaven. I'm like, Let's go to Revelation first.
Right, but I think the point is like, getting at like, yeah, I mean, we can also go the way of the spiritual and the physical, right? And I think the part of the story is just how like everything is spiritual, right? Like the hope, the beauty is enjoyable. The pain that we feel is real, right? And to acknowledge, I think the story acknowledges what I think young people know, right? And yeah, I definitely, I'm much more of a Christus Victor guy than a substitutionary atonement guy.
Same.
But that's my deal. But this is good, yeah.
It's from the German era.
What are we?
I like the way this allows for all of it.
Yeah.
It's broken, but God still holds it together, and then He's doing something.
Yeah.
about it.
A for you, Josh. I like my drawing.
About the drawing, what is the triangle inside the oval?
Well, I'm trying, I wanted to capture the Trinity.
Yeah.
So the triangle is just.
Draw the
Trinity.
characters.
Yeah, I don't know how, I
Turn
don't
it
know if it's a
in.
good way
This
to
is
do
my
it, but
dissertation.
I just, yeah,
Is this available online somewhere? Like,
No.
You can get the graphic.
I've never done anything with it.
There are some books about like
It's about to be.
narrative theology and
I
like
mean,
gospel
the actual
narrative.
graphic.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean.
This is
you
one of
take
the
pictures-
problems with it, though. It relies on really great drawing skills.
Yeah.
Get Brad to draw.
Obviously, like, you're an artiste.
I am not,
Like,
I am not, man, dude, you can do that, you can make it,
Look
you
at
can
the
make a
shape.
triangle,
The
that's
shape's
why,
beautiful.
take a picture of it and use it, I mean, I can take a picture of it, put it online if you want to do it, I mean,
You know what sheep look like?
use it,
Like
make it better.
That room that put it around there.
Really small heads.
They just draw it. I imagine somebody went in Photoshop or
Yeah.
Illustrator or whatever. Actually,
But the beauty
Yeah,
is you don't have
it's
to.
cool, it's kind of cool, so, and I love this discussion, right, like, think about what we're talking about right now. Like, this is really good conversation, like, about what the good news is, right? Like, that's where we need to go, and I just sometimes feel like the story gets short circuited, even if we disagree, there's this hope that we have in like salvation and God putting things back together and like beauty and brokenness, like kids want to have these conversations in their own sort of way, but I feel like the gospel story is big enough to handle it, but I think sometimes we feel like it's kind of what Andy Reid talks about, right? Like it's just like we don't even know if the story has a place in the conversation anymore, right? And I actually think it does, right? And I don't know, I'm kind of just excited that we're excited about the conversation, but make it better, man. Like do it, make it better. Yeah.
Steve, do you think with this, is there like, I guess it's sort of a gospel presentation in a sense, but like, is it kind of missing, in my mind at least, I feel like it's kind of missing that like the, going in Bartholomew's, the unbearable tension, like we live in this unbearable tension between the two very comprehensive stories, narratives, the gospel of kingdom and the kind of Western, like it's a little bit bright and fluffy.
Sure, that's fair. I think if I were to slow down and talk about it, I think I would try in the beginning of the narrative to continue to overplay or emphasize more empathy of the ways that we feel.
Because it also feels a bit linear, right? Like
Yeah, it was,
we've
yeah.
left that behind.
Yeah, I left that, right. I mean, sure, right. I mean, I don't know how you tell a story. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, if you could think about a way to not make it linear, I think that would be great. But I think at the beginning of the story, I think I would want to kind of say, hey, what you're feeling right now, it's, of course you feel it. It's kind of what Dr. Wusong said, right? Like, if it's hard, it's because it is. Like, if a bunch of people are asking the question, it's because it's something bigger, right? So I think if I were to slow down and talk about it, maybe I would try to allow that to happen, to kind of bring what's in the past still kind of the echo of the present, right? I said the ripple effect of, right? I mean, that's the kind of the language I use, but I think that's a great critique, actually. No, I mean, come back to me more like as you think about it, because I think it's a great critique. Not just.
But I think comparing like the different gospel presentations
Mhm.
can be really helpful, you know, and like, what does this bring and what does that bring? And I don't know if you're familiar with Professor James Chung and the true story and like the four circles and his presentation of the gospel. But one thing that it doesn't, it just goes from like sin, yeah, Adam Eve to like the brokenness of the world, but then to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so you really lose like the 7 kind of things that happened in the story before that. And one of the students recognized like, oh wow, there's a lot that happens before the cross.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate that about this
Yeah,
resource.
it's a great point. And I really don't, I mean, I think what Sarah said, I think like tracks sort of inspired like something better, but I don't think of this as an evangelistic presentation. I think of this as more of telling my kids and youth group what they're a part of,
Yeah.
right? Because they need to know that. It's almost more for them. Otherwise they forget, you know, and certainly I would hope that perhaps as they internalize it, they can talk to their friends, or if someone's like, well, what's Jesus about? You can help them, but I don't think of it as a track or like an evangelistic tool. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't think that way. But I just think kids need help remembering. They're like in this like theme right now of remembering, right? Remembering where we came from, but you know, also this idea of remembering, this embodied aspect of what the story is all about. Like it's not just in my head. It's really just. A couple other things. I'm gonna give you a break in a second, and then I want to talk about the final papers. Another thing that I do is sometimes kids just don't know where to find things in the Bible. So like if you give them a slide like this, and kind of say, here are all the books of the Bible, and we're gonna go to John, right? And then we're gonna go to John 3:16. Like it almost helps them kind of see like where a scripture passage is, rather than just assuming that we know. I mean, some of you have talked about this all week, like we can't assume things about what kids know about the Bibles, or they've forgotten because of the pandemic or whatever. Like, how do we continue to remind them that no matter what we talk about in the scriptures, even if it's about Jesus, that's still part of a story, and something taking out of context of the story loses its right? I don't know who said it first. A text without a context is a pretext for a proof text, right? So you have that aspect associated with it. So how do we help kids remember that, hey, there's the story, and we're gonna look at this part, right? You know, like, you know, we're in season 2, episode 1. Like that's almost like maybe we just need to change all like books of the Bible to like episodes, like seasons of the Bible, right? I mean, that's almost a better way to think about it. Yeah,
It's being recorded, and will we be able to see it again?
I hope so. I
That
think
was
it's being
awesome.
recorded.
I just,
It's
yeah,
recorded.
I'll go back and look
Yeah,
at it.
I'll post this for you. A couple other things, and I'll give you a break. So good news. I think the gospel-centered ministry is good news understood narratively. That's my point. The second thing, the other two are much shorter. Don't worry. The good news is known relationally, right? We talked about this. Like, it's not just about what we do, like individually. It's also about that as well. These are we had some people at our church have made these little crane birds. You know, like I don't know what they're called, like little. But before they made them, we asked our community to write down things that they wanted prayer for. And so we did that, and then we made these cranes, and then in our sanctuary, we hung them above our whole sanctuary, because we wanted just to say the prayers and the longings of our community are shared. They don't go away. Like the good, the bad, the lovely, the beautiful are all together. And I think that's just a great picture sometimes of like, I think what kids we all need to understand about like this idea of the gospel is this shared communal journey that we're on, where we feel the ebbs and flows of each other, for better, for worse, for good, for bad, all of that, right? And I think sometimes in youth ministry, we want to shelter kids from the pain, or like we don't think they're ready to like hold tension. And I actually think they can probably better than we can in some ways, right? Or how do we just do that together, right? So they're not surprised by it. So I think a lot about that. And then another thing I think about is I think good news is believed and discovered generatively, right? And you know this about me, and as I talked about faithing and about faith and doubt and a lot of the work that we do, like how do we remember that our journey toward becoming is a journey, and it's okay. Like, we're just taking that next faithful step, that next click, whatever it might be. We're encouraging our kids to do that well. The small things is really the work of God. The mustard seed moments, right? Like believing that somehow when something's planted, that it'll produce, it'll grow, it'll become, right? You know, I had students like take chalk and just write down like what are they doubting, what are they questioning, what are they wondering about, just to give them a chance to kind of verbalize. You know, this is just an exercise that we did, but what was interesting is it occurred to me as I did this with students, I actually got my leaders together one time, and I just asked them, are you doubting, questioning, wondering what's really, you know, and so they did this, like they had whole paragraphs of stuff that they were working through. You know, I just think about youth ministry, we spend so much time focusing on young people, as rightfully we should. We just have to remember that our volunteers are in their own spiritual journey and need probably more care sometimes. Like we expect them, I think that if I like bring out a volunteer that they've got their stuff together and I don't have to worry about them. Like I'm actually inviting them in to the redemptive story where their minds are gonna be blown. That's probably more realistic, right? So am I gonna care for them in that moment when all of a sudden they're struck by something or they don't know what to do, or they're put in a situation where they have to make it, right? So, you know, I think when I think about a gospel-centered focus on ministry teaching or whatever, I try to keep these things in mind because I think it helps me play the long game, not make assumptions, check my definitions. Remember, it's not about me. And I get pretty excited about it. It's kind of the fuel that keeps me going. I don't know what else to say. So I'd leave that for you for what's worth. And then I have a couple questions. Again, I'll give you the slides, but you know, how might we tell better stories? Like, I really believe academic work is a search for better language, better imagery, better approaches. It's not to be smarter or be better than anybody else. Actually, it's a portal into. I'm always trying to find better language all the time. Like that's why I will read fantasy, I will read poetry, I will read theology, I will read it all because I think I want my vocabulary to grow, right? What skills might we develop to do so? Like take a poetry course, like learn to dance. I mean, I feel like we limit ourselves sometimes to the work of the mind. To do something like that, you know what? And then I think this is important. What risks are we willing to take? I mean, I think the challenge that we have as teachers and as pastors is we pull our punches because we wonder what someone's going to say or how it's going to affect our job or if it's going to fail, right? I mean, maybe just me. I'll just speak for myself, right? So I think we're called to take the risks when nobody else will. If we don't take the risks, we can't expect other people to take the risks, right? And so I don't know. And then finally, how do we proclaim the Great Invitation? You know, a lot of times we hear about the Great Commission. We use that a lot. But an African scholar said, why do we call it the Great Commission? That sounds almost, you know, colonial in essence, right? You are commissioned to go and overtake the world, right? When it really is, I think what we've been talking about here is the Great Invitation. I've been invited. I want you to be invited. Let's be invited together, right? I mean, see how that changes it? Like, it just feels better to me. I don't know, right? So, and the Great Commission is not in the Bible, right? Like someone like made that up, right? So like let's change it. Like we can make it better, like, right? So, so I think about that a lot too. How do we think about this idea of an invitation into this amazing story that's totally worth it because it's the best story. It really is. And God wants us to be the best storyteller. And I think you can do that. So with that, final paper, let's take a break, 5 minutes. We'll come back. I want to talk to you about that. We'll see if there's any other questions you have, and we'll wrap it up. I love you.
I appreciate you. Here's wrong about me. I appreciate you, Drew. You're just literally wrong about every single theological topic.
It's an episode of it. Interesting. It'd be interesting to I know we've done this in some ways, but it'd be interesting to reframe the Bible on each theological topic as it arises. So like
Bible Project went in YouTube. So good.
I know I love Bible
So
Project.
good,
That
so
came out of my seminary.
So good. Those like kind of the categories or themes that they walk through.
But I mean, like taking scripture and like literally copying and pasting it into different, so like in First Timothy, it talks about Jesus being planted. And so putting that before Genesis and then like structuring it in a way where like as you flow through, like parts of Romans show up earlier, but like in Genesis 3, but other parts of Romans might show up post cross. And so like flowing, you know, this theme and seeing scripture in that way of like highlighting and then just using footnotes to be like, these are the scripture passages. So you almost read it narratively and italicize all your, like the words you insert to be like, and, or therefore, or like.
When you do that, I would love to see.
Modifying, as you're modifying scripture, obviously.
But yeah, I just wanted like.
Just even
to make that.
see it in that
Send
different
them a feisty
context.
text.
Two.
Yeah, and I would, yeah.
Family.
But that's weird. They just-
Sharing in my
that's kind of
spicy.
class. Most of them have had.
And time is really
simple,
right? Like,
just
I know,
take
you
it from
know,
him, take it
but
from
I
him.
think
But is there a bit of a sense that you can do
What if
a linear and then you into the three?
Like, what would you not understand about happening in the show from Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, you, like, I just get
Dad's driving
pop
me
cultural
nuts.
stuff that like,
Family
you know,
stuff.
well, I would know what the
Yeah.
heck's going on, you know, like.
I'm
missing
sure
a-
there is.
missing one,
Spicy text,
Just
maybe
like
a whole
it's
family
the
text.
Bible or entering into.
we always talk about.
I have a group of
Yeah, I can be
five.
used to that.
all female
Like,
cousins.
language,
And
cast
include
vision
some of our
like,
children.
the
our
narrative,
daughters.
the story.
And every project that
We
we
do.
do, I'm talking to you too.
That's what
because
we've been to all
Like
of our
every project we do starts out
family
simple, but then
frustration.
it
Yeah,
becomes
history writing
complex.
is a really
And to get on the
fun
other
little
side,
book.
to get to the simplicity on
But,
the other side of
Simply
complexity,
Good News.
that's
what
where the
makes
magic
gospel,
is,
like,
right?
good news,
So-
and he talked
When you
about
file,
it.
Steve.
That's,
Sure.
that's the.
For that-
That's where I always, that's
Spelling,
where we
stumble,
fumble and stumble.
Sam, I think I agree. I think I was thinking,
Two.
what are like the meta,
Mine's at
Maybe
4:55.
You going to LAX?
Yeah.
this, that,
Wait,
at least in
There's
experience,
Yeah.
make it not this.
Yeah.
What if we do
But-
this?
Yeah.
What
I mean, I
if
think
we-
your own personal experience is
What if-
more.
What if
Try
it
to
was
get rid
more
of-
like a,
Like
like this?
If I were going straight to the airport, that'd be
Right.
great.
Your life,
Exactly.
right? Like, you're
But thank you.
constantly at
Yeah,
times
don't
back,
start,
Adam
like,
and Eve,
Genesis-
like,
That's right.
falling again.
That's right.
Right.
And then you
Your
gotta
parents
walk
are
that
coming
whole, like,
To pick him up and take him to the airport.
I mean, is there a way?
What are y'all gonna do in between? Go eat something?
I get some lunch and then just go. We probably drive kind of close to the airport, grab some lunch.
I mean, and I think that gets
Not
to
a-
on the
true,
road.
like,
Very
That's
nice
nice.
stuff.
it removes.
Save me an Uber, you see him.
That's why you should-
Well, and it also removes.
You get to see 'em.
the kind
I think
of
that-
urgency of,
yeah.
like,
Do they come out to y'all
one
very
and done.
often?
Like, once they
Yeah.
accept the
They
story,
have their own
check,
spot
I'm
to be
good.
there.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's
I,
just-
like,
just
I'm
having-
peace out.
Yeah.
I've accepted Jesus, so.
But I.
for
I'm
me,
telling-
This is what this is
one of
what-
my favorite-
It's long, it's like.
In my combination, like.
This is-
Our son, I don't think our son-in-law likes it.
Right.
I don't think our son-in-law likes it very much when we come to visit.
No?
No.
And eschatology. And he like looks at me point blank and he goes, "You're ecclesiology."
Okay, we're stuck on it.
Don't have strong ecclesiology.
Yeah, so that's what this is where the spirit, I think that's what I'm trying to do there, but
Yeah,
yeah.
they're having their first baby and they live close to my son-in-law's family, so they'll get lots of baby time.
Yeah.
I told my husband we'll have to go visit more often because they won't come see us, so.
I will.
I have to, like, bring back the salt for it.
I was like,
yeah.
We just biffed a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, right, yeah, but I almost or even a two-dimensional, like,
Okay, let's do this.
Yeah, I'm ready to answer questions and get out of here.
If she does that, and she gives you permission, would you send it to me? She does, yeah, I would love that. I know, well, I have an artist as well, so.
Working, like,
I don't agree with Mark.
Very
Mark
cautious
Homer's
about
like
her art.
on
I think
the
it kind of points to the difficulty
what is it?
I should tell them I have to like leave like.
Cultural mandate.
Oh, really?
Where it's like the transfer
You should
order.
just go when you need to go.
I know, but
Well,
blessings, all you people.
but
That's what I'm gonna do. We're not done.
like,
It's gonna go.
I just don't want to be stressed to get to this meeting.
stretches on answer.
I keep looking at the time it'll take me to get there.
How long does it take you?
52 minutes. But it's gonna get more traffic.
As the day goes on. Yeah, there's a decent amount of traffic when I drove from the airport at.
Good luck.
Yeah, imagine it.
We were locked out. Oh.
Yeah, now it's 42 minutes to get to the airport.
Steve, what books from NT Wright were significant for you?
Well, I read his 3 tomes.
Right.
Voice party,
But
party
with
bathroom,
following
not the voice
Jesus,
party.
you know,
bathroom.
that was pretty
The
big.
urinal has a dividing wall on this side. So when you
I
walk
just
in,
think
there's a
his
stall
view of
here.
Jesus.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I love his writing.
Long enough for
Kind of
the
gave
urinal,
me hope.
but then.
Yeah.
the
Gave
other
me
side
hope
of the
again.
urinal is
Yeah.
I mean, it was just,
another
it's
stall.
not what you read, it's what you read it.
Yeah.
From the other stall.
Yeah.
I've made eye contact with Steve a couple times.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I love him.
He was like.
I mean, there's, like, Scott, he has a really cool little,
Yeah.
like a layperson's read on,
Somebody was
called
on the other one, and I'm like.
why the, is the gospel good news, or why the gospel is good, or simply good news is the title.
Right, yeah.
And he makes this great contrast if we treat the gospel as mere advice, like we
Right.
just sharing it as advice to like have a better life or advice to become good, or is it actually good news? 'Cause
Right.
if it's actually good news, well, first of all, it's way more fun to share good news than advice with people.
Yeah.
It's actually just, he has some really interesting quotes in that.
And so what is that from?
It's called Simply Good News by NT Wright. It's
Okay.
a really short book.
Pop up.
Right.
A fast and just a
You
really
airdrop
fun,
them to me.
fun, yeah.
I will.
Scott came up too.
So,
Yeah, it is.
Haley, your
It
airdrop
helped.
might be set for like
Mentions-
contacts only or
Yeah,
close contacts.
communicated
Oh,
all the time. And
Thanks,
it's
Steve.
harder to read the other part of it.
Wait, we share it, yeah. Share the good news as the,
Will,
Context,
yeah,
yeah,
right there.
moral
I just wrote that down. That definitely, that's true.
Two ways to live.
Oh, yeah.
Really? All right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's deeply criticized in the world.
Is it?
Yeah,
What is?
yeah. 2 ways to live.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like.
Yeah.
This one's shorter.
Yeah,
Says-
it's more transaction. It's like, this is the only reported newspaper in Sydney. Nothing else, just this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
One project, they representation of the city as well. Cross politics. Like, cause some of this.
Oh, yeah, we use it. a ton. It's so good.
That is shocking. It's always postponed. I guess because it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's annoying.
There's one in your section, there's one in. Yeah. It's like
Just that
the
it's
one
always
point
said,
and
like,
it's,
it's not-
yeah.
It's all
You're like,
usually-
yeah. And at the end of every video, there's the, hi, I'm so and so. Where the moment per day?
Did you like subscriber pay?
Yeah.
I have, cause we use it reasonable.
Yeah.
You are obsessed, which is wonderful.
I typed in his number.
Where'd you put it in?
You just type it in here.
Up there?
Yeah.
Do you like it?
Yeah, we.
I did this, though. It's Joseph
I have-
Shaw. Here, you can
There.
scan this right.
And then drive it.
Anyways.
All right, everybody, welcome back.
Yeah.
Let's talk final paper.
really excited.
Is that the final paper for this
Yes,
this
this one.
year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
not
a big
final
one.
paper,
Yeah,
yeah. Little final paper.
You can always think little final paper.
Yeah.
With a capital F or a lowercase f?
I know other words to begin with that.
If this is your first year, remember that, and you've heard it said a lot, like, I hope that your little final paper might contribute to your big final paper. It may and it may not. It's okay. But your work's not wasted. There's always something that will come out of it. So please don't be discouraged by that. I'm here to help. So you can call me anytime and we can talk about new stuff. I've had a number of conversations with you this week about it, but I'm always available and more than happy to talk with you about how you're feeling about it, what you want to do about it. That's the work. I mean, it really is the hardest part of a paper sometimes, is like what you want to write out, you know? And so if you feel that, like, I don't know what to write, or can't quite get it right. Yep, that's scholarship, right? You know, undergrad, even some masters, it's like write a paper on this, right? Like we actually take away the hardest part of paper writing in lower, other forms of education. But like part of the job is to figure out what you want to write about, and I'm happy to enter that space with you, and that's okay. So the final paper vision is you're going to write a 20-page research paper that operationalizes the practical theology process and engages theologically with relevant topic impacting our advocacy for young people within a student's particular ministry context. Now, if you don't know what practical theology is, or you haven't gotten to that unit, you don't have to worry about it. I'm much more interested in you sort of thinking about basically this. Like, what's the youth ministry challenge you want to address? And I mean, I use youth ministry in its broadest sense, right? What's the specific topic and who's the specific young person, okay? Like, you don't have to write on all middle schoolers, right? Like, you can be very, very particular, think about your context, think about some of the things that you're thinking about. Now, this challenge could come from two places, maybe more, but there's probably two. One is it's something that you've read, like it's piqued your interest, right? And or we've talked about this week. You're like, I think there's a challenge or a problem that I want to think about, and do that. The other place it could be is your experience. Like right now you're wrestling with something in your particular context that you really want to work out and figure out. Well, that's great too, right? So yeah. The second thing is what resources support your claim, right? So like, is this really a problem? You kind of have to make a case for it, right? And again, you have resources to actually do that. We've talked about a lot of things that are bubbling up in our challenges. From here, you can draw from our course readings. That's all I expect. And then I also want you to eventually draw from 3 to 5 additional sources specific to your topic. These are books or peer-reviewed articles, okay? So the reason for that is that most of the books that I've given you are pretty broad. Like, you know what I mean? There's not like, you're gonna have to go deeper than that. So once you pick a topic, I want you to draw from our coursework, but I also want you to then, hunt down a few other resources along the way. So, and I want these to be either like your extra resources should be books or peer-reviewed articles. Just note the difference between supporting literature and illustrative literature, okay? What I mean by that is this. It's like supporting literature is peer-reviewed articles or books that have help support your case or are really particular to the subject that have some chops behind it. An illustrative resource or literature is just it's making the point. So like, let's say you are like, well, what it says in USA Today is that, all teenagers only want to ride scooters, right? Or something like that. Okay, that's great, but that's not really like a resource or a blog that you come across, right? Or that's more illustrative, right? You're kind of making the case like this, for example, here's this and this, but that's not really a resource. That's more of just like an illustrative thing. So when I say 3 to 5 additional sources, I'm really talking more about like substantial books or peer-reviewed articles if possible. And again, if you have problems, or you're not sure what that means, or looking for it, come talk to me. If you're not sure if it's illustrative or supportive, then ask me. I'll tell you, it's no big deal. Like, but I think that's what we're trying to do. And then the third part is what might be an informed and creative way forward that you will propose, okay? So here's the problem. Here's why I think it's a problem. Based on the literature research, the things that we've learned so far, and why I think it's a problem, how I've come up with that. And here's what I think we should do about it, right? Like year 3, year 1 is a chance for you to kind of think creatively about, well, what's the solution? What's the way forward based on, again, readings, what you're learning, what you're thinking about, what's the way forward to actually solve this problem in a different creative way, right? You might say things like it's been tried to be solved in this way, and this is why that doesn't work. But what I think we need to do is this, right? So again, use this as a way to do 2 things. One, either think about your big project. Do you get more spam calls than ever? I feel like I get spam calls all the time. You can use it to think about your big project, or think about something that's more localized that you're just working through right now. Whatever you do, you're practicing writing, you're evoking your imagination, you're drawing from the literature that you've worked on, and you're set up really well. You've written an annotated bibliography. You've got like a summary of like a gazillion resources right now, right? You've had this week to add to that. So you're really loaded with a lot of stuff already that can inform what you're going to do. And now it's just sort of bringing it together and actually just making it harmonize and sing. That's what you're trying to do. Now, yes, sir.
Trying to figure out how deep to go into literature review and how much of it should be the creative way forward. Like for a 20-page paper, I'm assuming it's not like between the blue headings like 777.
Right. I don't know if I completely care. I think I would say, well, 777 isn't bad. You know what I mean? Like, I think you need enough space to make your case. And then I think you're gonna, maybe and then the middle section maybe isn't gonna be quite 7, that's gonna be more. And then I think whatever you're gonna propose would be great. I'd be worried if you did like 5 pages of like the first 2, and then you just talked about all the great things you're gonna do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so think about that. And if you're really worried, then talk to me. I think it depends on the reason I'm hesitating, I think it depends on the subject. Sometimes there's just more you need to explain than you otherwise. So
I think in the past I've always done 1/3 of the paper is the problem, 1/3 is theological reflection of the problem, and 1/3 is what we do now.
Yeah.
Is the theological reflection on the problem what you're calling informed way forward? Because I feel like that part's missing from.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or have I just developed my own system?
No, it's right. No, I think that informed and creative way forward is the theological. It's the theological and
the
whatever else, right? So I mean, what's driving that? So, and I think. Yeah, no, I think that's right. So that changes your 1/3. I don't know what that looks like. But the final 1/3 would really say, based on theology, based on whatever I think I need to do.
Yeah, based on what I know now about the problem and my kids and this theology, I'm gonna.
This is what I'm gonna do, and here's why I'm gonna do it, and this is why.
Particular prayer groups, yeah.
As I'm looking at this, if I'm remembering correctly, sometimes the first 2 blue things kind of become a big one section. chunk.
Yeah. I hope that to scaffold you through this, but I think, hey, ladies and gentlemen, get in here, Scott. You've read his books. You know the man.
Every time I come to my office, I listen to all the stuff that you guys have to say. It's fun. Take
The
care.
number of people you have come up in our conversation so much.
I didn't do it. It's not my fault.
Yeah, right. But I want you to know, I have the privilege of doing so many cool things with this guy, and whatever you read, he is, one of our professors said, I want to be the person that's the same person in whatever circumstance. He is that way. You are a good man in scholarship, in working together, in your writing. And
Well, that's very kind of you.
Yeah, and so we have been
It's fun to
grateful for
see.
your work.
It's fun to hear all these conversations going on.
Yeah.
Have a good time.
See you, Scott. Bye. So great.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's the nice thing of being right by the office here. So, okay, so sometimes they blur together, and I think that's okay. I mean, I want you to make sure that you're sort of thinking about being clear on saying, what are you actually addressing? Because that'll keep you from like going 100 directions. And then, what are you doing to kind of support that? That's going to be a lot of the work that we're doing here. And then the way forward will be the theological and the missional aspects of what we're doing. The focus really on this module or this year is on sort of the missional aspect, right? Like, what are we going to try? What are we going to think about? So, okay. And I am going to try to scaffold you with you along the way. This will all get up on Canvas. I'm really sorry for the confusion of day 5 Canvas. That was really, I just realized I didn't update it very well. But I will get stuff up to you as soon as possible. Moving forward for the rest of this quarter, the module 1, which is sort of after our intensive here, it begins October 16th. Don't panic. And what I want you to do is give yourself a break, like go home and just put everything aside, and then like I'll remind you, like in a couple weeks, I want you to start thinking about your paper topic and initial resources. And the goal is to name your research topic and gather resources that you deem relevant to your topic. Notice what it doesn't say there, that it has to be all read. I just kind of want you to start figuring out like what sources am I going to use and am I going to talk to each other. And then on November 6th, I just want you to name your paper topic and some of your resources, okay? And I just want you to post it to everybody because I think it's great to kind of share with each other. Well, what's everybody thinking about or doing? Sometimes it inspires if I feel stuck or whatever. So it's not any other thing but just for you to share with each other and keep doing like you're doing now. Module 2 then is I want you to begin to work on your research thesis and literature review. And then I want you by December 9th to have your research thesis and literature review done of what you're actually thinking about. So clearly state your thesis, offer a synthesis of your main themes that inform or impact this topic. This will include references from your literature. Again, this is not perfect prose at this point. This is kind of saying, here's my thesis, here's the literature. Based on this literature, here are the key themes that I'm thinking I'm going to use to support my argument based on what I've learned. I mean, if you want to write it out, you can, but I'm just trying to get you to move in a direction of it becoming more clear. And here's the reason why. Because after December 9th, I kind of want you not to do anything. Like, I want you to go do ministry, rest, relax. Like, let it go. Like, if you want to keep working, you can, but I'm not going to make you do anything for the month of December because we move into Advent and you all have responsibilities with that. I'm trying to be sensitive to your rhythms associated with that. If you need more time to do this, that's fine. But I just don't want you to have the panic of after the new year going, oh my gosh, I've got a final paper coming in. Here's why it's especially important for those of you that aren't first years is because of the quarter system, the due date's been moved up. It's early March, I think, rather than like, I think in the past it was late March or early April. So you just have less time after we round the horn into.
February.
Yeah, it's February.
February last
Oh,
year.
yeah, more time?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Well,
Really? Oh, okay, great. Okay, well, oh, and then you get around to it. Well, then do whatever you want. I didn't realize that. Okay, I'm panicking for you. Okay. So, so then this is what it looks like. Then I'll just sit down. That doesn't stand up. I don't know what I was doing there. I'm moving into the winter quarter, and so module 1 will be you really coming together with the research thesis, your introduction, and your outline. So now you're getting to the point where you've written your thesis, you know what your intro is, you know where this paper is going. Remember, an intro is like mapping out what you're going to go, and then you're giving me a pretty solid outline of where this research is going. And if you got that down by January 29th, then you have till March 17th to turn this in, and that gives you like another 6 weeks. Okay. The hope is that nobody panics. You get feedback along the way, and you and no one gets in trouble, and then we're all set by the time we get to the final paper. Now, what we also do in this class is I want you to not just write the final paper, but there's one other thing I want you to do, and that is to write a 1,000-word article that emerges from that paper. Because one of the things that I want to encourage you to do, it's not required, but I want you to be able to have an opportunity to publish that somewhere, whether it's a blog or your denominational newsletter or your specialties, or we can find other places to do that. I want you to have the opportunity to get that out. So that gives you a chance to write that article, and I'll give you feedback on it. And I'll tell you like, hey, this is good. If you change these things, let's figure out where we can share it or do something with it. Or if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. But I think it's important as Drew said before, and others of you have said, as we live in the world of the academic and the practical, it's like, how do we distill what we've learned to something that's manageable for someone that's actually, nobody's going to read your 20-page paper except me. Yeah, and maybe a few others. But someone will read your 1,000-word article. I hope they do. I think it could help somebody, right? So I want that for you, and I want you to develop the discipline to do that, okay? And what we do also, and this will be somewhere during the week of March 13th, it's TBA because I'll just figure out with all of you what might work is, and I'll get that to you soon so that we get it in our calendars, is this is a chance for us to once again come again and present on our final papers. Like you did that, you read your papers, 1,000 words at the beginning of this week. This is a chance for you to actually put a presentation together and just in like 7 minutes, share what you learned. That's right. And it's really a beautiful time. And it gives us a chance to be back together. It's really great. We move along, you know.
But it is like a very long call.
It is a very long call.
Like-
Did we divide it up in 2 days?
Can we do
last
two?
time?
Maybe
Maybe
like
one
we
day.
Can we please
Or more now.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
a lot of us.
So you're gonna, yeah, so it's a huge commitment, but
It's awesome.
it's awesome.
Just know.
Yeah, and we'll have a break and everything, but it's great to learn.
Bring snacks.
The
We
advice
do
will be a lot of
overnighter.
chatting that occurs.
An
Overnighter, a lock-in where
Yeah,
we
we
just.
can do a lock-in.
That'll be by 3 a.m.
And I'm gonna share the gospel with you, like, so yeah, so it's a chance for us to once again come together and share our work, right? And again,
Horrible. I hate that meeting.
you know, you've even heard it this week,
I'm with you, Tara.
like, you have referenced each other's work, like, hey, when you did in that, you know, when you talked about that, or when you wrote on that, right? I mean, that's a beautiful thing, right? I think that perpetuates
That's what I'm
the
saying.
possibility, what
We
Jeremy
do
was
too.
talking about, of carrying on the conversation maybe when we aren't together anymore, right? When we know what each other is doing, that really helps. In my world, I just have certain conversation partners with certain people because I know their work and know what I need them for, or what they need me for, right? It's us a chance to do that. So, so I always want whatever you're writing to come out like to a paper, but then I want it to go beyond that. And so this is our chance to do that. Yeah.
Come on off that, is there I don't know if there's a place or a platform, maybe in Canvas to put like each of our names and maybe what we've written on, especially for like those going, you know, in the third year, as we even formulate, like I was talking to someone about social capital.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I wrote on that. And I did a lot of like time
Yeah, you
finding
did.
resources that I could send you to, or you could look at my paper and look at my, you know, notes. And I was just thinking about that as we kind of formulate, there might be someone that's
Yeah.
gone down a road that they could like guide you towards.
I love that.
I
How
don't-
do we do that?
Google
Well,
Doc.
maybe like an abstract, like a 3-sentence abstract of the paper, and then the sources below it, so that if they really want to grab the paper, they can, but.
Or if
most
we do it in Google Docs, you could just link the papers
Google
as
Doc.
that
Yeah,
HTML,
so,
yeah.
and that way you can, because I think probably most of us would be more, we would be interested in the paper, but more interested in that list of sources of just getting a place to jump in at and go.
So if I set up a dedicated Google Docs, or is there something in Canvas?
Maybe just like the name of your paper and then like keywords like
Yeah.
social cap, you know, you put here are the keywords.
You
that
could make it a
look-
Google Sheet. It might be easier.
Yeah.
You can set up an assignment.
Google Sheet, okay.
Do you want me to make it?
Well, I don't think we want it in Canvas because Canvas is hard to.
Clunky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but like, there might be a time, a couple years down the road where I'm like, I've been thinking about this thing. I'm gonna, because a Google Doc will stick around forever.
Yeah, the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Until Google.
You can have files to the group.
Now, do we post
Wait a
our papers post editing from Steve, so that everyone can get an idea of where to improve and where?
What about a Google Doc link within our Facebook group?
Right.
That would be good.
Because then
You
if
can
it's a
pin it to the
collaborative live document, then.
Speaking of the Facebook group, Jeremy, you gotta let go of leadership over there.
No, I don't think.
It needs a better cover
dictator.
photo.
Wow.
Sounds like Fee's taking it over.
So we're gonna work on the picture. Google Doc and the
What
Facebook
is the
group.
cover photo?
And Sarah, if
like the
I
generic
don't, if I run into trouble, can I call you to ask you?
Jeremy could set it up.
I have a question regarding like this paper and the big paper.
Yeah.
And if I want to draw from previous writings.
Yeah.
previous years.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like, you know, obviously copy and paste, you reword what you've written in the past. How does that?
Yeah, so you're talking about the final big paper, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so one thing Cindy said yesterday is you can cite your previous papers, you cite yourself, would be one thing. If you want to reincorporate some of your writing, I just would say you would rewrite it and bring it into your argument. And like, you're gonna have to rewrite it.
Yes.
Like, so I'm not worried about plagiarism. Like, I know you're not just dumping it in. I'm gonna know it right away. It's so easy to tell. It's not even fun. So I know you're not gonna do that. So, you know, I just think you can rewrite it. And then I would also, just to be doubly sure, I would just like also cite myself, like, you know, let's say you did a page and you rewrote something that you did before and make it fit with what you're doing because it's better. It's probably a better piece now in the final thing. I would still cite that paper.
Yeah.
So like, when you cite something, you're like, everything's better. Like, because then there's just there's no plagiarism. It's when you don't cite things that you get into trouble because then they're like, where'd you get that from, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because over the years, part of what I've tried to do is write on what I think I will write on.
Yeah.
In the final paper, like
Yeah.
the big one. And so just trying to think through what,
Yeah.
obviously not, so retelling it, but then also citing it.
Yeah, I think we do both. I think that'll be fine. And your final paper is gonna go through so many iterations. It won't look anything like that. But you shouldn't be penalized for doing good work. And
So
you know
like
what I
the
mean?
title of the first paper was like the comprehensive frame, and it was like how to have a conversation with an individual student.
Right.
And so like if I kind of take that language and
Yeah.
put it in just cite it.
Yeah, just cite it. Like,
Which
I'm
you
using
gave me
this
that
idea.
phrase, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, what's that?
You gave me the language, the comprehensive frame.
Yeah, oh yeah, so I've expect my name to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the comprehensive frame, I wrote on this back here, but this is how I'm thinking about it, I mean, I think you just do that. It's cool. Yeah. You'll be all right.
Sure.
And
you've got to navigate this because like writing about emerging adulthood,
Uh-huh.
you have a bunch of articles and sometimes there's lit reviews.
Mhm.
And you're not like creating something from scratch. You're
No.
quoting Arnett and you're quoting other
Yeah.
sources that you use.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and
yeah.
quoting myself, which is really sounds arrogant,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like, just want people to know where you're getting your stuff from, because people do look at that, not to check if you're plagiarizing, but there's things I say in shorthand in one article that I have a whole other article on somewhere else, right? And so they can go there and get the whole enchilada where, right here, I'm like, I do that.
So when you're writing that, do you go in a previous article I wrote, or do you say, Steve argues that?
Argue with argue.
I would like to do that. Usually if it's me, I'm writing a piece and then that's too many words. Like, you want less words, not more. So, yeah.
But you never say Steve argues.
Steve argues, it never works very well. So, yeah. Right now you're like, great, but I know like in 2 weeks, like I'm gonna post something and you're gonna panic. You don't need to panic. Like, we're in it with you. You can call me, you can call Andy. Andy said serious Momo. I was giving me a hard time this morning for not being here. But we're here for you to help, and you're a good investment. All right. Good. And I can't wait to see what you write. That's all I got.
Just so everyone knows, the Facebook group is updated with a new image.
Jeremy's so proud of himself.
Yeah, okay, good. Look at that. Check that off. We'll work on the Google Doc. We'll get that done.
That's awesome.
I have a citation for Steve.
I love it.
The date is fine, and I have the citation from yesterday's lecture. Whole parade is ready to go.
Nice, nice. Okay, let's stand. Let me do this.
Just a picture of.
Get out of our way.
Okay, that's cool.
That's great.
Oh my gosh.
Beautiful.
I'm so glad it's written up.
My friends, may you know that you are a good investment. That the Jesus who you believe in believes in you. That your work that you do matters. May you have safe travels. May you also find that reconnection that you need with the relationships that you love and the work that you do. May you have courage to love ferociously, to think creatively, to live purposefully. May more water come out of the boat than in. And may you know God's grace. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
For those hanging around today, there's a plan for fun if you'd like to join in.
Okay. So there is, so Stacy really wants tacos again.
Yeah.
There's a taco place down the street, and then it's a couple blocks from ice cream, which Stacy also wants to. And I'm not gonna argue with that because I really like that ice cream.
No, really?
Oh, you do?
Confused on that
Then I
point.
gotta
I mean-
take Dane to get it anyway.
I think you converted somebody and bought them ice cream.
I
at the
did.
same time, right?
Praise God. And then
The two converted.
we're gonna go to Griffith Park to finish first. So if you don't want to do the first part, we're probably gonna meet at Griffith Park, I would say about 1 to 1:30, and it's